We are in sunny Cardiff where it is actually not raining for once. Peter's been here for about 24 hours now.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell them a bit about what we've been doing here?
So we've been testing out the 5G networks in Cardiff from EE, Vodafone and O2, who all included Cardiff in their 5G launches, which were spaced out throughout the year.
So the dates for EE was May, Vodafone was in July, and O2 was the most recent in October. Of course, 3 do have 5G sites here, however they haven't launched their 5G for us to use, so we couldn't test it. But we've had a great time. We've explored the Bay, explored Butte Park, city centre. It's been absolutely wonderful. We've got loads of footage to share from the area, and I think we better get started with this 2019 Roundup.
Yep, so we're going to do the 2019 Network Roundup in one video this time round, which will be quite long, no doubt.
Yeah.
Filmed both in Cardiff, where we are now, and in London as well.
Yes.
So let's get this Roundup started.
Yeah, let's go.
Right, so 7 months ago, all the way back in May, EE launched their 5G in the UK's 4 nation capitals, as well as Birmingham and Manchester, using 40 megahertz of 3500 megahertz spectrum they acquired in the 5G auction process.
Now, we have stopped right here on our way back from the Bay, because right behind us, somewhere about here, I think I'm pointing the right way, it's behind me so I can't see it, is a Flagship 5G site which uses Huawei Massive MIMO. It's built on Capital Tower in the centre of Cardiff, so it covers a very large area, and it's built on top of EE's brilliant already 4G network, which has a lot of spectrum, so when you pair the two together you can get some amazing speeds.
In the months since their 5G launch, coverage has spread to numerous cities throughout the UK, including Hull, which is my university city and where I'm filming right now, next to a very busy and loud roundabout. But I'm here to demonstrate a very cool feature of EE's 5G. In the distance on the left there, you'll see that there is a tower block. That site has 5G deployed on it, and much nearer you'll notice there is a Streetworks pole on the right. This does not have 5G. I have my OnePlus 7 Pro 5G device here, which is saturating the 5G connection. On 4G, for our anchor, we are getting eNode B31010, which is that little street pole to the right. But we are also connected to 5G, which is delivering 200 to 300 megabits per second on the NR side of things. We have a nice selection of multiple beams there with PCI 653, and they're coming in very nice and strong with an RSRP of -76 to about -80, and they are coming from our tower block over there. But you can see on 4G the throughput is around about 100 megabits per second from the dual carrier L18 coming from that pole up there. Meanwhile, we are getting about 200 to 300 megabits per second boost over the NR for a total throughput of about 300 to 400 megabits per second. This ability to deliver 5G to customers of sites which do not carry 5G themselves is the reason that EE is able to cover cities with 5G and provide the uplift so quickly and so successfully. And it means that customers of these small poles are able to get a massive uplift from other 5G sites that are deployed in their city. So in other words, the benefits aren't just limited to those who happen to have a 5G site serving them, which is amazing.
Supporting these 5G upgrades and Intersite capability has been a massive backhaul transformation, migrating sites from typically 1 gig MEAS to either 10 gig OSA or E-band microwave backhaul, dependent on what is available for delivery in the designated area.
EE's done so much more than rolling out 5G this year, however.
In fact, they have massively changed their spectrum. So, let's start off with the first thing that we know about them doing. They reorganised all of their band 3 spectrum in the country. So what they did is they moved their base 4G layer from 1667 down by about 5 megahertz to 1617. Then what they did is their second carrier 1811 they shifted down to 1761. Now why would they do this? Well, EE in urban areas had about 80 megahertz of spectrum deployed. That was across bands 1, 3, 3 and 7 and 7. And so what they wanted to do is expand this second band 3 carrier from 10 to 15 megahertz, but they could only do that by moving it down due to the placement of T-Mobile 2G at the start of their 1800 holdings block and the end of their 1800 holding block being Orange 2G. So they've now got two band 3 carriers. When expanded, it's 35 megahertz, 1617 and 1788. But that's not the only change to their spectrum holding.
So EE have also started using the last 15 megahertz of their 2600 megahertz FDD spectrum on macro sites, which brings up their 2600 megahertz 4G deployment to 50 megahertz paired on 2600 from 35 megahertz using the EARFCN 3029 alongside 3350 and 3179. Notably though, this spectrum has been used a little bit before on Nokia small cells in central London, but hasn't been used in a macro way. But all in all, the widened 1800 MHz that Jake's just spoken about, combined with the 50 MHz of 2600 MHz 4G, brings EE's macro 4G deployment to over 100 MHz. And all of that 100 MHz can be 44R. If you add in 800 MHz, that will shift it up to 105, of course, but still that's an absolutely absurd amount of spectrum.
For those who live in rural areas such as this and have Nokia as their radio access network vendor, EE has deployed 256 QAM modulation on 4G, which significantly improves throughputs for people in these areas who reside in good conditions. Even down here by the coast with seawall and buildings and everything in the way, throughputs are still over 100 megabits per second despite being in actually quite weak signal conditions. Some of the rural Nokia sites have also started to recently gain the flagship capacity adds their urban Huawei brothers have been getting as well, specifically L21 and 44R across the high bands. An example of one of these is at Ingold Metals in the Skegness tourist park area, which is a huge holiday destination in the UK. And this site has 44R, L18, L21 and 2600, and has the dual 1800 MHz carriers and dual 2600 MHz ones. So it is a really high capacity site, and that's just because during the summer season this carries an absolutely terrific amount of load. Looking forward to 2020, there's going to be widespread upgrade and replacement of 2G, 3G, 4G poles like the one behind me to support 5G. Specifically, poles like this one, which is a phase 5, as well as more compact ones like phase 3s and phase 4s, are going to be converted and, well, largely replaced with phase 7 and phase 8 poles, which can support much more antennas, as well as massive MIMO active antenna units as well. These new poles will enable much more 4G capacity as well as for 5G. Now let's jump to central London to talk with Jake about Vodafone's developments of the year.
So we're outside Vodafone's central London office, now called the Speech Mark, although previously called Smale House, to talk about Vodafone's 5G launch, which happened at the start of July this year.
So Vodafone have 50 megahertz of the N78 5G band, which means that they have more than EE and more than O2. Not as much as 3 though, 3 have 140 megahertz, but that still puts them at an advantage because on some sites in central London they are running 50 megahertz and on the Huawei sites in Cardiff, 40 on those. So it's the Ericsson sites in London that are getting all the fun, and they are getting 50 megahertz of N78 spectrum, which can greatly improve speed because, well, it's an extra 10 megahertz, which is always good.
And especially this area of central London has quite impressive density of Vodafone 5G sites, so we've had continually good performance as we've been testing around and about today.
You pretty much find that all of these sites that have 5G also tend to have band 32 from what we've seen. Not all of them, we're not saying that that's the case for every single site, but they have greatly improved their band 32 coverage in central London, and probably seen about 5 sites of it today.
Yeah.
And I think almost every single 5G site that we've seen has had the band 32 as well.
The band 32 universally causes a massive jump in performance.
Yeah.
It's like an extra 150 megabit per second kick, which really pushes it into the next gear.
Yeah, because that band only, it's supplementary downlink, so it's one direction. But also the device support still isn't great. It's much better now that the new iPhones support it. However, you find that when you use it, you tend to be one of the only users actually using it, and so the speed increase can be pretty damn big.
What kind of speeds have you been getting off it?
Oh, so this morning when I was testing, because I arrived at London early, so I went to go and meet Peter, I managed to achieve over 400 megabits per second just on 3CA. I think we'll have a screenshot of that up now. And then I realised that on my dual SIM phone, if I disabled the second SIM, I could get 4CA, so that's bands 1, 7, 20 and 32, and I almost broke 500 megabits per second just over 4G. So that's not 5G, just 4G. And since the device is a OnePlus 6 and it doesn't have that many streams, bands 1 and 7 were also 4x4, so had my device had more streams, I could have got even faster speeds and potentially broke half a gigabit per second just on 4G.
Seriously good stuff.
Hey, it's me again, and you'll notice that I'm in a much different location to where I was prior in the video. The reason for this is it doesn't exactly matter where I shoot this part, because this is a change which will be affecting Vodafone and O2 customers all over the country. And it's already happened. So at the start of the year, Vodafone O2 began the complex process of changing over 2 of their spectrum blocks in the 900 megahertz frequency. So how the spectrum was laid out is below me right now. 6 chunks, each alternating between the operators. This is ideal for 2G and 3G scenarios, but when it comes to 4G, we want to be as efficient as possible, and we like to have large contiguous carriers so that we can run larger LTE carriers, because it's better just for like CA combinations, etc. So what Vodafone and O2 decided to do was trade 2 of their blocks. The first 2 blocks stay the same. However, Vodafone's second block gets expanded, and what they do here is essentially move all of their G09 next to their second 3G carrier 2987, and then all of O2's spectrum is shifted to the end, so they have all their second 3G carrier, which now becomes 3050 from 3012, next to all of their G09. Now let's discuss LTE on 900 megahertz. Because Vodafone at the end of last year trialled some, and O2 has recently been trialling some as well. So let's discuss Vodafone last year. They trialled using 5 megahertz of their G09 spectrum with the 4G carrier of EARFCN 3698 to run a carrier. However, this spectrum is now owned by O2, so they have ceased that trial as a result. However, they have ran 2 more trials this year. One of them was in Castle Carry, where they used the EARFCN 3574, and the other one was in Stoke-on-Trent, which used the EARFCN 3575. Both of these trials replaced the second 3G carrier 2987. Let's now move on to O2's LO9. So O2 replaces their second 3G carrier much like Vodafone did in the trial, In the case before the 900 megahertz swap over, this was 3012, which got replaced to EARFCN 3624, and then after the swap, the 3G carrier became 3050, which gets replaced to EARFCN 3700. Both of these carriers are 5 megahertz, just like Vodafone's was in the trial. So we've got both of these operators trialling LO9. Presumably next year, as a result of this swap, they're going to be trialling 10 megahertz LO9.
It's back off to location now, where I joined Jake to talk about the remainder of O2's developments over 2019.
Alright, so we're here in Bank, and right behind us is a O2 Huawei 5G site. It also has a massive MIMO panel for 2300, but that's for 4G. So Peter will tell you a little bit more about O2's 5G.
So O2 launched their 5G around the UK in October 2019. They launched with all three of the major radio access network vendors, so Huawei, which this site is, Ericsson in places like Leeds, and then Nokia in a lot of London.
Now, how fast is this site?
So this site has been doing absolutely amazingly. So you probably won't be able to see from just this, but we've been getting about 600 megabits per second on speed test, with total throughput in the field testing software hitting towards 600-700 megabits per second.
About 580 megabits per second of that over 5G.
Yeah, over 5G.
Which is a lot of speed for just 40 megahertz of N78. So O2 Huawei, very, very good, very, very fast.
The Ericsson and Nokia sites I tested in a sort of epic shootout a few months ago, and the performance on those was found to be very variable. But in Cardiff, which is where we filmed the intro segment of this video, O2's a bit interesting in that there are the Unwound sites where Vodafone and O2 have separate 5G equipment, which we'll talk about very soon, but there are also sites which are fully shared for 5G as well, where the Vodafone Huawei 5G sites also carry O2 5G.
So we are in the city centre near the Motorpoint Arena, University of South Wales campus, and behind us is the fire station, which has on top of it a Vodafone 5G site. But as well as that, it is also one of the first sites in Cardiff to get the O2 Unwind.
And in fact, it's not just one of the first Unwound sites in Cardiff, it's actually one of the first Unwound Vodafone O2 sites across the country if we exclude the situation in London. On the top of the mast is Vodafone's Huawei 2G, 3G, 4G and 5G equipment. They use Huawei Massive MIMO for 5G, which are the smaller panels. Meanwhile, the lower stack has O2's 2G, 3G and 4G on it, using a full array of Ericsson equipment and CommScope, many port antennas, which have basically everything going through them, 88R2300, 88R 5G and so on.
But that site uses 88R for 5G. A lot of the other ones which have been unwound in Cardiff have massive MIMO.
The fully shared Vodafone Huawei 5G sites that also broadcast all of O2's technologies, including 5G, look just like a conventional Vodafone Huawei 5G site, with the AAU 5613 massive MIMO for 5G alongside the Huawei passive panels and conventional remote radios that you'd find in somewhere like Manchester or Liverpool, except these also carry O2's 5G. Going forward, this is the strategy that O2 is going to be using to roll out 5G to Vodafone controlled zones while they await the unwind process like we saw earlier. But the unwind takes a lot of time to do because they're having to install completely their own kit, which is complicated from a lease point of view, as well as just simply there's a lot of equipment to bring onto rooftops and onto sites. So in the short term, it's much easier just to share the Vodafone equipment for 5G for the time being. Performance off these Vodafone 5G sites for O2 customers was absolutely amazing though.
they were just superb, most likely helped by Vodafone's 10 gig backhaul to sites. O2 have also been changing their deployment structure in places like London, moving from 6 sector across their FDD bands and U09 to doing 44R on L18 and L21 using AHEGB Nokia remote radios. O2 is also preparing to deploy 700 MHz, with the auction for that being next year, through the use of triple band AHP MDA remote radios, which do 700, 800 and 900 MHz in one unit. Last but not least, let's talk about 3.
Right, so here I am in Farnborough. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm here. Well, this is the perfect location to demonstrate what 3 have been doing throughout 2019. What they've been doing is going around swapping out their Samsung equipment at the base of sites such as this one, and replacing it with Huawei equipment. Now, this is just a simple 2T to R swap, so all that's changed is the equipment at the base of the cabin. The antennas have stayed the same. This site has gained L21, and so it's just band 3 and band 1. Okay, so I am now in Frimley, and right behind me is what's known as a max config site. So this is a 3 site which has been swapped to Huawei, and unlike the last one, this one has had its antennas changed and has an array of new bands. So the site before was just L18, 2TRX, however now the site is L08, L14, L18 and L21. Every single band has 4TRX using new Huawei hardware. So for the L08 and L14 they each have Huawei 5301 RRUs. And for the L08 and L21, they have dual band 5501 RRUs. The site also on top has 2 massive MIMO units, one's presumably for EE and the other one is for 3. So as soon as 3 launch their 5G in this area, this site will be getting it. And on top of a brilliant already 4G layer.
3 did launch commercial 5G all the way back in August. However, the reason that we've not mentioned it so far is that it's for home broadband use only, using a separate grid of masts to 3's conventional mobile network. So the 3 5G in London uses the UK Broadband, or previously called Relish, service masts, which have been rebuilt from using quite old Huawei 4G 3.x GHz equipment to now being rebuilt with Huawei massive MIMO for 5G, so that's AAU 5614s, as well as new remote radios which are 5501s, which carry the 4G anchor. But as this is a limited service only for home broadband users and not mobile, we didn't really feel that it should be mentioned prior to this point.
Alright, I think that brings the end of year roundup for 2019 to a close. So lots has happened this year, and it has took us quite a while to film all this, so I'd like to say a special thank you to the people who helped us do that. Thanks to Dorico for helping us film in Cardiff, and thank you to Tony for helping us film in London. It would have been almost impossible without you two to get the shots that we did. Yeah, so me and Peter hope to see you next year for the 2020 roundup. Got lots to look forward to, such as the potential rollout of 700 MHz, 10 MHz L09, and even more 5G developments. So can't wait to see you next year. Alright, goodbye.
And thanks for watching from me as well. Producing this video has been something of an epic endeavour thanks to the UK's cripplingly disrupted rail network at the moment, with seemingly endless delays and cancellations. But nonetheless, it has been an awesome experience visiting Cardiff, going out with Jake and the others, and being able to revisit a lot of these other places in order to film.
Special thanks must go to Jake for hosting us and also co-presenting this video, to Dorico for being the camera person in Cardiff, and to Tony for being the camera person in London. Without their help, this video would not have been possible, so much thanks must go to them. And I hope to see you again on the next video and future end of year roundups. Thanks again and see you soon.